Dr. Ehrlich, your main concern has been the population bomb, as you call it in your book. What hope is there?
We've got to use political processes. In the not-too-distant future, the government will simply tell you how many children you can have and throw you in jail if you have too many.
I do know that at this time, unless now we think of what America is going to be like in the year 2000, this increase in population, and do something about it to stop that pressure, we're going to reap the whirlwind. Because look at what the year 2000 will be. If the present trends continue, our cities are going to be choked with people, and they will be impossible places in which to live, and the explosions will be even worse.
If we do not, by humane means, limit our numbers, then numbers are going to be limited by more famines and shortages.
The disaster will take the form of famine, plague, or war. They're mankind's old companions, fundamentally. You just got to remember this. There's no way out of the arithmetic. There will never be 7 billion people in the year 2000.
And now a milestone for all of us on this planet today. The United Nations declared that today the world's population reached 7 billion people.
That relentless population clock just keeps on ticking and ticking.
Well, if they kept such a clock in Italy, it would be ticking backwards. The government there thinks there are not enough Italians.
Demographers warn that the shrinking population could drag the country into an unprecedented economic crisis.
Dire predictions of an overpopulated planet have been with us for centuries. What if they're just plain wrong?
Alert! The number of babies born in America last year falling to a 32-year low.
But there is already a population crisis hitting major economies across the globe.
Look at these numbers. How do you explain this decline?
You know, you've got cases like Japan where adult diapers outsell baby diapers.
The world's falling birth rate isn't on the list of major threats to life as we know it, but it soon will be. Taxes are destined to soar, pension systems will become unsustainable, while our healthcare systems won't be able to cope with the ratio of old people to take care of compared to the shrinking number of taxpayers. Businesses will struggle to find workers to hire, school closures will accelerate, while social care will continually be slashed.
And they say it's an economic time bomb.
I'm worried about the birth rate. Most people think we have like too many people on the planet, but actually this is an outdated view. I think that the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse. Collapse. I want to emphasize this. The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse.
Why are people having so few children? The more I read about falling birth rates, everything was negative. You enter a downward spiral. As you have fewer and fewer children, you have fewer and fewer future mothers, which in turn goes on and on and on. And no society in history has been known to come out of that spiral.
The speed of population decreasing is going to speed up.
Yes.
And you call it collapse. I agree with
accelerating
that.
collapse. And then common rebuttal is like, well, what about immigration? Like, from where?
I started the birthgap project in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2016 after seeing data for Germany showing there are only half the number of children there now compared to 50 years ago.
What are we going to talk about today?
Global population collapse, what else? A fun topic. How's the audio? As a lifelong learner, I had been brushing up my skills on data science. My goal had been to find an explanation to one of the world's great mysteries. Why did the number of children being born in Italy, Japan, and Germany fall so rapidly at the exact same time? Whether data can help answer that question or not, one thing's for certain, with this trend having spread across the entire industrialized world and beyond, we're all going to notice. Due to globalization, a worldwide cascade of shrinking economies will affect all nations, including the US. But it's not just economic issues. Societies with low birth rates are destined to have a burgeoning number of older people to support. Humanity has never faced such a crisis.
For a society with a sizable population to experience continuous and very rapid population decline in a prosperous and peaceful time has never happened in human history. There's no precedence.
Should we be worried about population decline?
Population decline is a form of social change. Can government be a practical substitute for the family structure that we took for granted up until, let's say, like breakfast yesterday morning? That's going to be really hard, I think.
Am I right that people aren't talking enough about this?
In my view, incontestably you're correct. So why aren't they talking about it more? Well, to some degree, maybe people haven't been run over by this problem themselves yet.
Do people talk much about falling birth rates?
I don't think that people talk a lot about this. It's a minor problem, I think.
Are you worried about America's long-term low birth rates?
I don't think it's a terrible thing. Culturally, birth rates have different rising and fallings.
Are people worried about this, about not having children? Do you worry about
I don't worry. Do you worry?
No.
We don't worry
No, you
about
don't
these
worry.
things. We have other things to worry about.
But is it really a problem? Is it bad for the country? No. Is it bad for workforces? We have robots. We have much more automated work. So why is it a problem?
What people usually don't think about, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but what is unavoidable is massive graying, massive aging of the society. And so all of these places in the world which are under substantial below replacement childbearing for decade after decade, are on a trajectory not only for shrinking, but also for really massive population aging.
So you were shocked about hearing
I was really shocked. The professor told us that, our generation is decreasing, so that we need to protect our older generation. And he showed the statistics. I'm really worrying about Japanese future.
What Germany?
Let's look at Germany. This is the map.
Oh dear. Look at that.
I would not have expected this. I was not aware of this. Not at all. What's the impact of this? Huh?
Understanding population trends can be tricky, partly because it takes decades for changes to play out. Initially, low birth rates are almost undetectable except to maternity wards, but soon enough, we'll find closing schools, businesses that can't find staff to hire, and then close because they can't find enough customers. And meanwhile, the cost of providing our older generations with healthcare and pensions will continue to rise and rise as more and more people live longer and longer. To understand the scale of the problem, we just need to look at the world's falling fertility rates and how many countries have fallen below the population tipping point. Demographers call this tipping point the replacement level, when women on average are having 2 children that survive into adulthood. Today, 70% of us live in countries below that tipping point, and yet somehow our focus has remained on fears of never-ending population growth.
In the world of statistics, Hans Rosling is a rock and roll star. And in an era where the talk is of rapid population growth, he uses hard data to try to communicate the opposite story. Here's a clip from his film, airing tomorrow night on BBC Two.
Up to 8, and then it goes up to 9, and then it goes here. But see, it's slowing down. By the end of the century, it's becoming more flat there. And if I do...
No one could explain population trends better than the late Hans Rosling, including why our total headcount will increase for a while, despite the number of children having peaked.
Now, this will confuse you, because how can then the total population grow like this if the children doesn't increase? Where will all these adults come from? And to explain that, I will show you the world population, ladies and gentlemen, in the form of foam blocks. One block is 1 billion. We have 2 billion children in the world. Then we have 2 billion between 15 and 30 years of age. We have 1 billion 30 to 45. We have 1 billion 45 to 60. And then we have my block, 60 years and older. We are here on top. Huh? So this is what we have today. Now, what will happen in the future? Do you know what happens to old people like me? They die. The rest, they grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. These ones are now old, time to die. And then these ones grow 15 years older and they have 2 billion children. This one die and the rest grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. And without increasing the number of children, without increasing the length of life, we have 3 billion people more by this big inevitable fill-up of adults, which will happen just when the large young generations grow up.
Hans Rosling's building blocks explain beautifully how the world's total population is going to fill up with older people and not children. Yet before this project, I had no idea about low birth rates outside of Europe and Japan.
I would say at the moment, we can break the world down into 2 components if we oversimplify. Sub-Saharan Africa and everybody else. If we take all of the rest of the world, all of non-Sub-Saharan Africa, we're already below the replacement level. And we've been below the replacement level for a little while now.
Barring compensating immigration, no society can survive long-term below this replacement level tipping point. And the farther down birth rates go, the faster they will decay, or to use the correct mathematical term, exponentially decay. Nations like Japan, Italy and Germany, with birth rates around 1.4 children per woman, will decay by around 1/3 per generation, meaning that in 2 generations, the underlying population will fall by over half, and in 3 generations, by 70%. But it turns out, ultra-low birth rates go far beyond these countries.
All, without exception, all industrialized countries, developed countries, have below replacement fertility.
And we know what happens with continuing below replacement fertility. What's working pretty well now, manifestly, is going to be unsustainable a generation from now if you just do the arithmetic.
It's striking, and there is no single explanation. In different contexts, you have very different stories.
But the trend started around the same time in the early 1970s.
Yes, that's amazing, the amazing thing. And in the West, this is attributed to the pill. In Japan, the pill was introduced in the early 1990s.
So it's interesting, though, that while Europe blamed the contraceptive pill for the fall in birth rates,
it's not the case in Japan.
But yet it was falling at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
It's so difficult to describe, and it may be very different things in different places that are causing these changes.
In our culture, it's completely different. Like in Western context, about 1/3 of babies are born out of marriage. But in Japan, marriage and childbearing are closely associated. So it's very different.
And again, there is something strange. In Germany, education is fully subsidized. Completely opposite to Japan, because education in Japan is very expensive. So there are lots of contradictions.
As a statistician looking at raw numbers, if you just look at that coldly, you'd say the probability that there's some common driving factor is very high.